and Jackie will be recording it. My name is Eric Howard. I'm the director of the E2 Tech Council. We have had some very last minute changes to the program because one of our speakers is having a root canal today. Unexpected. These kinds of dental emergencies happen. And as a result of that, we'll have more time for conversation among members of the group. Some people may not be joining us because they've heard about the change already. We look forward to finding an additional time when Kimberly Smaha from the Born Global Foundation can share her knowledge and her experience with us. And we may do a separate webinar, or we may simply have her do a recording and then share that recording with our members and our community. My name is Eric Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the E2 Tech Council. E2 Tech Council does 1 or 2 webinars every month, as well as in-person gatherings around the state of Maine. Today's program is about avenues for federal funding with speakers from the Clean Energy Business Network in Washington, D.C. Lots of things are happening in the state of Maine. As some of you know, Governor Mills put out a report recently talking about the clean energy economy, where there are more than 15,000 jobs and an expectation that that number will actually double to 30,000 jobs by the year 2030. Some of this growth will come about because of new technologies that are available to have a positive impact on different segments of Maine's economy. Again, 20, 30 years ago, very few people had heat pumps. And now the plan is to have 350,000 plus new heat pumps in the next few years. There's lots of job growth in Maine. We're growing faster than the rest of New England in terms of new jobs in the energy as well as environmental sectors. As you'll see here, quite a few are in the energy efficiency side of business, but there's also growth in other areas. E2 Tech has been around for more than 20 years. We're the largest community of environmental and energy professionals. We've got more than 200 member institutions. Our mailing list of 4,000 people brings together different constituents from the business world, government world, education world, as well as the nonprofit community. And then we have partner organizations such as the Clean Energy Business Network. We help convene meetings and we're a catalyst for innovation. Part of our work is also gathering data and making it available to others, new developments, new ideas, so we're a credible resource. And then we meet people regularly in networking events and gatherings. Our next summer gathering will be on July 10th at the Maine Beer Company in Freeport. That's our summer social, and we look forward to seeing 100 or more people there. I now have the pleasure of introducing Andy Barnes, who's the Director of Policy and Communications for the Clean Energy Business Network in Washington, who's joining us today. And Andy, I pass it on to you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. And while I'm getting started here, I'm going to attempt to share my slides, so bear with me momentarily. Great. Okay, can you see my slides okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, well, as Eric mentioned, my name is Andy Barnes. I serve as Director of Policy and Communications at the Clean Energy Business Network. Just want to thank Eric and Jackie for the opportunity to present today, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. Did want to flag 2 things before we jump in. So in the presentation, we do cover some tax credits just want to flag that I'm not a tax attorney. I just play one on your Zoom screen, so I cannot provide formal tax guidance. So please do see this as educational only. Additionally, I will be throwing out a lot of content and information at you. So, not all of it is relevant to everyone. So do keep an eye out for those programs that may be most relevant to you. And in addition, I do believe the slides will be disseminated after the program. So you'll be able to click through the links to the various federal programs that I cover. So with that, let's jump in. So for starters, a little bit about our organization, the Clean Energy Business Network. We serve as the small business voice for the clean energy economy, and we work to push clean energy forward through policy support, mainly at the federal level, market and technology education, and business development assistance. So we are a DC-based nonprofit with a national footprint. Our network is both geographically and technologically diverse. We have a little over 8,000 clean tech business and community leaders across the country. And as you can see, they're working in a diverse array of clean energy technologies and services. So wanted to flag a few standing resources on our website. So these are freely available resources to you. Far and away, the sort of the backbone of these, I would say, and the one that I would, if I leave you with anything with this presentation, it's to check out our clean tech funding database. So this serves as a repository, sort of a clearinghouse of clean energy funding resources, both at the federal level, state level, private sector. So it really does do a good job of covering a broad array of opportunities. And we also have the ability for you to subscribe by punching in your email, and you can select those opportunities that are most relevant to you in terms of the technologies, and have those delivered on either a weekly or monthly cadence direct to your email inbox. So encourage you to check that out. In addition, on our website, we have something called the Ecosystem Resource List. So this lists organizations, ecosystem support organizations, such as E2 Tech. And if E2 Tech, my apologies, I'm not sure if you all are listed, but if E2 Tech would like to be listed, happy to do so. And if there are any other ecosystem support organizations on the call, please do reach out and we'd be happy to add you. We also have several email alerts. So our weekly newsletter covers new funding opportunities. It also covers policy updates, events, things of that nature. And then we have 2 monthly updates, one focused on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and another one focused on clean tech innovation opportunities. And then finally, we have a few blog series, one covering the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is a law that was passed in 2021 that has a lot of climate and clean energy programs embedded in it. And then one on the Inflation Reduction Act, which you've probably heard of, which was passed in 2022. And these blogs are a blog series. So we are producing, discrete elements of each of those topics and going a little bit in depth on them. So our most recent one is on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, but encourage you to check that one out. Lastly, in terms of our programming, I wanted to flag, we produce a lot of events. So regular virtual and in-person events covering clean energy. We are in the process of organizing a series of roundtables over the next year. So I know the audience that I'm speaking to now is predominantly in Maine. So we don't have anything in Maine coming up per se, but we do have some events coming up in the Northeast, generally Pittsburgh, 2 events in DC. So if you're interested, please do reach out. So let's jump into federal energy funding. So at a high level, at a 30,000-foot level, I wanted to flag two major pieces of legislation that I already mentioned. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So these two laws, the infrastructure law passed in 2021, the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, they've created a massive flow of new funding programs to address climate change and to boost clean energy, to boost resilience in communities across the country. The infrastructure law, I believe, had upwards of $50 billion flagged for clean energy deployment, advanced transportation deployment. There's a lot of funding in that law for EV charging, for instance. The Inflation Reduction Act, which you've probably heard of, had $369 billion in it to advance clean energy and climate-related opportunities. So a large bulk of that funding is flowing out through the tax code in the form of energy tax credits, energy efficiency tax credits. But there are also grant programs and financing programs such as low interest loans, things of that nature. Embedded over all of that, the Biden administration has launched what it calls the Justice 40 initiative. So the Justice 40 initiative really is an aspirational target to ensure that at least 40% of the benefits of all of these investments are flowing to underrepresented and underinvested communities. So think energy communities, so communities in perhaps coal country or where mining has historically taken place or where fossil fuel plants have historically supported jobs. As we transition away from the fossil fuel-based economy to a clean energy-based economy, these communities, some of the programs that I'm going to talk about are intended to ensure that they're not going to be left behind, that they too can also transition. In addition, communities of color that are unfortunately underrepresented in a lot of opportunities and have historically bore disproportionately the brunt of climate change and environmental pollution. So the Justice 40 initiative seeks to channel at least 40% of the funding to these communities. I wanted to highlight a little bit the American Made Challenges program. So this was stood up, I believe, in 2018. So DOE's American Made Challenges program is intended to rapidly iterate technology development or community-based and clean energy deployment. So it does this through a very novel mechanism, and that is cash prizes. So if you've worked with the government before, especially the federal government, you know that things can move very slowly. And you also know that there is a lot of burdensome paperwork. So those things tend to preclude people who aren't used to navigating the system from accessing those resources. So these cash prizes are really intended to lower the barrier to entry, and they do so through a much less intensive prize application process. So these prizes typically have very short PowerPoints or other elements to them that enable folks to throw their name into the hat and pursue funding. In addition, they're typically set up in phased approaches. So a typical prize will award, say, 20 teams, $50,000 each. And then each of those teams are entered into the next phase where they're able to compete for $100,000 and then a final round for $250,000. So in this way, these cash prizes are set up to completely avoid reporting requirements and essentially incentivize teams from progressing on their projects by pursuing additional funding through later stages. So the cash prizes are no strings attached, but teams are incentivized to be successful at their work, as I mentioned. So the CEBN serves as what's called a power connector. So we are affiliated with the American Made Challenges Network in that we support individual prizes. Our team has supported 21 prizes to date. Many of these prizes are technology specific. So for instance, the Solar Prize, Geothermal Sensing Prize, but we're also seeing many of these prizes are community-based. So we've recently worked on one focused on rural communities, for instance, or underrepresented communities. So we would encourage you to take a look at the American Made Challenges program. Each of the dots that you see on this map also represent other ecosystem support organizations that might be able to help you advance your projects. So the network, also tries to incentivize teaming by encouraging different stakeholders to team up to apply for various prizes as well. So again, this is a fantastic program, and there's a lot of opportunities out there that are frequently popping up. So would encourage you to subscribe to their email list so that you are aware of future opportunities. Additionally, wanted to flag 2 recent actions that the White House took related to opening up access to capital, specifically for smaller businesses and startups. So they released what they call the Climate Capital Guidebook. So this really does a great job of giving you a great look at all of the programs out there across the Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, USDA, among others, that might help facilitate or finance clean energy projects. In addition, the White House announced that they had lifted a cap on the Small Business Administration's 504 loan program, specifically for energy efficiency projects. So I believe the cap used to be around 5 million. They've eliminated that cap, so small businesses are able to now leverage that program a little bit more so. Moving forward, wanted to focus a bit on federal opportunities specifically for communities. So for starters, the Inflation Reduction Act created an office called the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, aka SCEP. SCEP is tasked with providing funding and technical assistance to states, territories, tribes, local governments, community-based groups. If you think your group, might qualify, but it's not listed, still encourage you to check this out. SCEP is tasked with carrying out some of the energy efficiency rebate programs and facilitating those through state energy offices, providing technical assistance to those offices. But it also carries out other programs related to workforce training, for instance, or programs intended to help students, things of that nature. So please do take a look at some of those programs, and perhaps some of them might be relevant to you all. Next, I wanted to flag the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was stood up by the Inflation Reduction Act. So it essentially created what some people refer to as a national green bank. You may have heard of green banks at the state level. I think Connecticut, for instance, is a state that was very forward-leaning when it comes to green banks. So think leveraging public resources to extend the pool of capital by pooling that with private capital. So through public-private financing, you're able to stretch public resources a bit further to finance clean energy projects. So there are three main programs: the National Clean Investment Fund, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. I think between those two programs, there's $20 billion that entities have been awarded to then finance clean energy projects at the state and community level. The Solar for All initiative, I believe, was funded at $7 billion. That program is intended specifically for solar projects in disadvantaged communities. So, there is a lot of funding coming out of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It is not, to my knowledge, pushing funds at the community level out the door quite yet. So we did produce a Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund blog post recently. So please do check that out if that sounds relevant to you. Next, we have DOE's Communities LEAP program. So LEAP stands for Local Energy Action Program. This facilitates a community-wide economic and environmental benefits through DOE's clean energy deployment work. So this is focused on low-income, energy-burdened communities. Again, those are those communities that the administration is trying to ensure through the Justice 40 initiative that they're being included in the clean energy economy going forward. So this program matches selected communities with technical assistance providers who then help them bring their projects to fruition. So through clean energy planning and economic development. So unfortunately, cohort 2 recently completed, but you should be able to check back next fall for cohort 3. Next, we have the Community Change Grant Program. So this program is run out of EPA. It provided $2 billion towards environmental and climate justice activities to benefit disadvantaged communities. So projects are intended to reduce pollution, increase climate resilience, and build capacity for these programs to address those challenges. So take a look at this one because the deadline is November 21st. So this opportunity is available over the next few months here. Next, we have the Clean Energy to Communities program, otherwise known as C2C. So this connects local governments, municipalities, utilities, community-based groups, and others with experts from the Department of Energy's national lab system. So the Department of Energy runs the national labs. So there are 17 labs all across the country that have some of the top experts in the world when it comes to clean energy research and analysis. And this program enables communities to identify and pair up with subject matter experts that can provide unbiased technical support to communities across the country. So the kinds of support that this program provides: in-depth technical partnerships, pure learning cohorts, and expert matching. So, again, unfortunately, this opportunity for this year closed earlier this month, but it is likely to reopen next year. Next, we have environmental justice focused opportunities. So the Department of Energy has an office called EJE, the Office of Environmental Justice, that focuses specifically on assisting communities with these sorts of programs. So this includes meaningful involvement by affected communities and broader stakeholder populations. So minority educational institutions, so programs for students, workforce training, technical assistance for community leaders, training programs, and the Environmental Justice Institute. Next, let's get a little bit into the tax credit bonuses. So again, a disclaimer, I am not a tax attorney, so I can't formally provide tax guidance. So please do see this as educational only. So you may know that the Inflation Reduction Act significantly revamped the tax code to support clean energy related projects. And so what it did was it boosted some of these tax credits. It brought in new technologies such as energy storage. And crucially, beginning next year in 2025, we are going to have for the first time a technology neutral energy tax credit regime. So every year, the Department of Energy will produce a list of technologies that qualify for these tax credits. And each year, perhaps there may be new technologies that are added, but it will specifically support clean energy projects that are zero emissions. So it does this through two main ways: the production tax credit and the investment tax credit. So the production tax credit is a tax credit based on how much energy is produced by a project. The investment tax credit is a 30% tax credit on the whole cost of the project. Now, both of these tax credits have various bonuses that taxpayers are able to take advantage of. The first one is the domestic content bonus credit. So for projects that are produced domestically, particularly with an emphasis on the iron and steel sectors, these projects are eligible for up to a 10% bonus. So I will mention that in order to qualify, projects must meet certain requirements, namely the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. You know, we do have a dedicated blog post on this topic as well. And if you want to learn more about the domestic content bonus, please do check that one out. Finally, we have the low-income communities bonus credit. So the low-income communities bonus credit is a bonus credit that would be stacked on top of the previous credit I mentioned, and on top of the 30% base credit for the investment tax credit. So if a project gets the base credit of 30%, the bonus credit of 10%, and layers that on top with this low-income communities bonus credit, you could get up to potentially 40 or 50%, or excuse me, 50 or 60% of the cost of the whole project paid for by the federal government, essentially. So the low-income communities bonus credit is specifically for solar or wind projects less than 5 megawatts. And it's for investments in low-income communities and on native land. If a project is placed into service on an affordable housing development, that's where you would be able to qualify for the 20% bonus. So again, this opens up a lot of fantastic opportunities to ensure that clean energy investments are flowing to low-income communities, to underinvested communities, and ensure that these communities are included in the clean energy economy. Finally, I wanted to leave you with a few opportunities from our funding database. So there are 4 outstanding opportunities going forward, and this also gives you an example of what our funding database looks like. It is typically organized with the upcoming deadlines that are soonest listed highest. There are also opportunities that are ongoing that don't necessarily have deadlines, but we list the deadlines, the amount of funding, a short description, and then a link to the opportunity itself. So as you can see, there's a few opportunities listed on the page here. One for ETIP, the Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project, helps communities assess and advance solutions that best meet their goals. There are also other opportunities for energy analysis, spurring projects to advance energy research, minority serving institutions as well. So with that, I think that concludes my presentation. I did, finally, wanted to thank E2 Tech again for the opportunity to speak to you all, but also wanted to thank Awa Darbo, who's on the call today. She did the research for this presentation and really made my job that much easier. So thank you to Awa. So with that, I think we've set aside some time for questions. Happy to answer any questions that folks might have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Andy. Because we're quite a small group, Jackie is going to make it possible for anybody who wishes to speak up, just to make life easier for all. We don't necessarily need to have the kind of formality that we might have if there were 100 people on this Zoom call, which has happened in the past. Earlier this week, I was in Brunswick for a meeting with the Maine Technology Institute. They are a source of funding at the state level, and they also are sometimes an avenue for federal funds to flow to entities around the state. Again, their job is to diversify and grow Maine's economy by investing in innovation, fostering new products and services that create jobs. Pretty much every year, they award 10 million or so, $8 million to innovative companies across 7 sectors, and the environmental sector is one of their sectors. So in addition to thinking about the federal money, please also thinking about the state's funds as well. And then I'll also make people aware, in case they haven't followed what's going on in Augusta, that the legislature approved a $25 million bond issue for research and development that will be on the ballot this fall. And if the people of Maine agree, there'll be $25 million administered next year by the Maine Technology Institute to support R&D mostly in the private sector. There are a couple of questions popping up here. Matt, do you want to give your question out loud, or would you like me to read it?
Hi, yeah, excuse me, thanks for the presentation, very informative. I had read some stuff about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and my understanding is that they've selected these so-called banks, the entities that are going to kind of push this money out. But there haven't yet been any financial products or services coming out. Is that correct? And what is the expected timeline, do you think?
Yeah, that is correct. So you're right that essentially the entities that are being tasked with passing the funds, on to states, to communities, have been selected. I believe, they now are controlling those funds for all intents and purposes. There is a lot of money in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We're talking in the billions, right? So it's not easy to just simply push that out the door. So my understanding is those entities are staffing up currently to enable them to more effectively work with the private sector to push those funds out the door. We do have our Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund blog post that has more information on this that I flagged. I don't know exactly when the timeline is for expecting projects to actually be financed out of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Awa, if you do know, please jump in. But yeah, apologies, I don't have any more clarity on that front.
Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you. I'll keep an eye on your blog. Thanks.
Yeah. And again, the Inflation Reduction
What
Act,
was the question?
So the question was, when is the expected timeline for funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to actually be pushed out the door to communities on the ground?
I don't know, but I do know like the winners did start their programs, so they did start creating the programs where people can access those funds. I'm
Right.
not sure the exact timeline.
So yeah, I mean, this kind of illustrates another point here. A lot of the programs in the Inflation Reduction Act are brand new, right? So they're going from 0 to 1. Some of the programs are, or some of the funding in the Inflation Reduction Act boosted funding for existing programs. In those cases, I think it's a little bit easier to push money out the door. But in the case of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, you know, as I mentioned, you're talking about perhaps hiring new staff, implementing new systems, creating whole new systems. So it takes some time.
Yeah, like the Opportunity Finance Network recently announced like 3 new programs that they're rolling out. So I just think it's gonna take a bit of time.
Andy, as you probably know, Maine's population is less than 0.5% of the United States. And so I guess my question for you here is, are there any other states, perhaps larger states, that you think have been particularly effective in getting some of these federal dollars? And what might the organizations and agencies in Maine do that we could replicate what's going on in some of these other states that are effective in trapping this federal money?
That's a good question. So my understanding is some of the programs are allocated on what's called formula funding. So it's, I think, based on the population of the state. But then in addition to that, there are additional funds that states could compete for on top of sort of the formula funding. So I think a good example of that is I believe it's NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure sort of charging program. Some of those funds were allocated on a formula funding basis, but then others, I think, states were able to compete for. When it comes to states that are effective at pursuing these funds, that's a good question. And obviously, being a smaller state with limited resources and smaller staff and not as many subject matter experts, that can create some challenges. So, you know, I think, you know, is your question focused at how best to support Maine's energy office, or sort of how best for other entities to pursue those funds? I'm trying to get at the heart of your question.
I think it's actually more about other entities,
Yeah,
not necessarily like the governor's energy office.
right.
They definitely, in the governor's office, have their minds focused on what's available in Washington, D.C. It's the other entities that are working at the more local level and may not be aware of what's happening
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
district.
So, you know, we see this all the time where it costs time, energy, and effort to pursue grants, right? To pursue opportunities. And when you don't necessarily know if you're going to succeed, there's a bit of a risk there, right? And so you have to pursue those opportunities that, given your limited resources, limited staff, make the most sense for you. So I think for starters, knowing what's out there in as exhaustive of a way as possible is the best way to set yourself up for success. And again, I would point folks to our clean tech funding database, which we're constantly updating, adding new opportunities to. So I think half the battle is knowing what's out there and when those deadlines are, so that you can allocate your staff time accordingly. In addition to that, I would also say that particularly with American-made challenge program opportunities, there is a big emphasis on partnerships. So if you're pursuing a prize, going at it alone, you might not be as successful as if you teamed up with another entity that might bring something else to the table. So try to take advantage of, some of those teaming lists, those opportunities to team up with other entities that are working in your neighborhood, working in your state, that might be able to bring something else to the table.
Yep. It's always better to get a piece of the pie than get nothing
Sure.
at all.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Other questions from the audience? No. When thinking about partnerships, how often do these groups focus only within a state versus sort of a region? So again, E2Tech often does things with Boston-based organizations, or sometimes there are collaborations that go across the Northern Forest
Yeah.
between Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York.
Sure. So, again, I would point towards the American Made Challenges program. We've seen some of these prizes focused on very small community sizes, but also focused at the regional level in carrying out economic development work, sort of at that regional level. I think we've seen less so across state lines, across perhaps say the entire New England region. So it's more focused on the community-based level, municipalities, counties, and in some cases focused on statewide work.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, that does. Thank you. Again, since Kimberly had her dental emergency, our program today is a bit shorter than we had originally planned. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. If we don't have additional questions or dialogue, I suggest we end the program now and people can go on with their day. I will keep after Jackie turns off the recording, we'll keep the program open. And so if anybody wants to stay on for a few minutes and have just a one-on-one conversation, we'd be glad to do so. And Andy can be reached at abarnes@cebn.org if anyone would like to reach him directly.